security first, then democracy?
There's a series of interlocking arguments here. I've just advanced one set of arguments about the Baker-Hamilton plan. It's got a lot of constituency in the United States, and our argument about a negotiated stage withdrawal flows into that. But there's a second argument for Australia as well, and I will, without reservation, argue the Australian national interest. We have enormous security challenges here in our own region, our own neighbourhood, our own backyard. We've got the Solomons, which is in a mess still, Fiji still on the edge. We have rolling problems when it comes to domestic political stability in East Timor. And then there are other questions about wider Melanesia. We do not have a huge army. Ask any defence and army expert how we are coping with our operating budget for army, the equipment with which our troops are being sent abroad. We actually need that capacity closer to home, given the range of contingencies we're responsible for here.
The head of the US forces in Iraq, General Petraeus, and President Bush are sounding confident about the so-called US surge in Baghdad, that it's actually working. In fact, Mr Bush reportedly said on arrival here in Australia that America was kicking ass in Iraq. If the Petraeus report to Congress next week says the war against insurgents in Iraq is now being won, would you accept that report as an accurate reflection of reality in Iraq, and would you rethink your plan for a staged withdrawal of Australian troops?
On the question of the content of the Petraeus report, the truth is none of us know. We'll see what it says next week. Can I also say, however, in the United States, you've just had released a GAO report, Government Accounting Office report, which looks at both the political and the security benchmarks which are supposed to be realised in Iraq. And a very small number of the political benchmarks have been reached, and a very small number of the security benchmarks have been reached. There's a body of evidence out there which points in different directions as well. To answer the other part of your question, will we be changing our policy or posture when it comes to the staged withdrawal of Australian combat forces? The answer to that is no.
How do you stage a withdrawal of a mere 500 troops anyway? It's such a small contingent. It seems hardly worth staging the withdrawal. I mean, do you pull them out in 100-soldier lots?
Look, on the mechanics of that, you actually work with the head of the Australian Defence Force and look at the precise logistics involved in each step in that process. When troops are sent to Iraq, they're usually not sent in one lump, they arrive in segments. I think the key and rational thing to do there is to work with your defence hierarchy on those questions. But the point I'd make overall is, if we do form the next government of Australia and we're elected, then I'm not about to do, what Mr Zapatero did in Spain, which is, hello, we've been elected and we're out the next day. That's not our approach. We're a responsible ally of the United States. And as I've said to Vice President Cheney before, and to administration representatives in Washington when I visited in April, we would take that approach to ensure that proper staging could occur.
Australia's Defence Minister Brendan Nelson said on Monday after a visit to Australian troops in Iraq that perhaps you should listen to the soldiers there, who he says are quite angry about the notion that you would remove them before they finished the job. Have you spoken to Australian soldiers there, and would you care either way about their sentiment in this?
You know something, Kerry? Australian troops, I'm sure, like the whole community, will have a range of personal opinions about the conduct of this war and about how long Australian forces should be in Iraq. But what I know about Australian troops and their high levels of professionalism is that they act according to the direction of the democratically elected government of the day. Their discharge of their responsibilities in Iraq has been first class in response to the directions of this government. I've never had a complaint or quibble about our men and women in uniform. If we're elected to office, there'll be a very clear-cut mandate in terms of what we do. And as for Mr Nelson, can I just say, Mr Nelson as the Defence Minister, his credibility went up in smoke and hasn't recovered since he announced to the world that the reason we're in the Iraq War was to protect oil. I mean, Mr Nelson, frankly, is the person with the least credibility on Iraq policy across what is a very tattered national security performance by Mr Howard and Mr Downer.
You said in your press conference today that you'd given President Bush one or two books when you saw him this morning. One you identified as being a book on Curtin. What was the other?
Well, the other one dealt with China, and it's about China's diplomacy in East Asia, and a thing I've often referred to in public speeches, both in Brookings when I was there in DC a couple of months ago and elsewhere, is the importance of the United States maintaining effective diplomatic engagement right across East Asia. I understand the centrality of Iraq in the US debate. What I'm also saying is, Here in East Asia, there are multiple challenges. The US administration is doing well on the Korean Peninsula. They've done well with Taiwan. But over time, I want to make sure, to the extent that I can as a Prime Minister if I'm elected, that the US is very mindful of maintaining the whole fabric of its diplomatic engagement across our region.
So can I read from that you told Mr Bush today that he's not doing enough and doesn't have enough presence in Asia?
No, what I was saying to the President, and mindful of the fact that I'm not going to the detail of any of those discussions.
I think you might have.
Well, it's your interpretation. What I was saying to the President is, here in our part of the world, the Australian Labor Party, whether in government or in opposition, we support very much a robust US presence in East Asia. America remains an overwhelming force for good and stability in the world. In the 90 years since we've been acting together, since 1917, when the Americans entered World War I, we on the Labor side have disagreed with the United States effectively twice on security policy, once on Vietnam and now on Iraq.
We're out of time, Mr Rudd. Thanks for talking to us.
Thanks for having me on the program.